Pay attention to Elianne Andam, 15 years old, laughing as she grabs a bag and runs past the Whitgift Centre entrance at 8:31 a.m. on September 27, 2023. She has less than 50 minutes left to live because Hassan Sentamu, 17 years old, her friend's ex-boyfriend, has already made his decision. He's wearing 2 pairs of gloves, a face mask, and carrying a kitchen knife he took from home that morning. On this day, Elianne wanted to help her best friend get her teddy bear back. On this day, Hassan had other plans. This is the story of 50 minutes that destroyed a family forever and exposed catastrophic failures in the UK care system.
You savagely took her life in the most degrading manner in broad daylight. You killed her without mercy as she pleaded for her life.
What he did next was pure evil. Elianne Andam lived for justice. At 15, she was a diligent student at Old Palace School in Croydon, wearing her uniform with pride every morning. Her parents, Dorcas and Michael, called her their miracle baby, a child who filled their home with music, laughter, and boundless energy. She dreamed of becoming a human rights lawyer, of changing the world, of fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Her aunt remembers a girl so vibrant that even now, she can't bring herself to walk past the mural painted in Elianne's memory on Wellesley Road. Elianne had big dreams and an even bigger heart. She stood up for her friends without hesitation. When someone she loved was hurting, she acted. She was fiercely loyal, protective, and always there when people needed her. Her friend S, the ex-girlfriend at the center of this tragedy, would later tell investigators that Elianne used to stick up for me and protect me. That loyalty, that instinct to defend those she cared about, would cost Elianne everything. September 27th started as an ordinary school day. Elianne met up with her 2 best friends before classes. One of those friends, S, had recently ended a 3-month relationship with Hassan Sentamu. The breakup had been difficult. S desperately wanted her belongings back, especially her teddy bear, a sentimental item that meant the world to her. Hassan had agreed to meet near the Whitgift Centre to exchange possessions. S brought a carrier bag filled with gifts Hassan had given her during their relationship. She expected to walk away with her teddy bear and close that chapter of her life. She had no idea Hassan was planning something completely different. Hassan Sentamu looked normal enough on paper. At 17, he was enrolled in a sports course at Croydon College, trying to build a future for himself. But beneath that surface, something dangerous had been festering for years. Hassan's childhood had been turbulent and traumatic. He moved to England from Uganda when he was 5 years old, then returned to Uganda at age 11 for several months, where he claimed he was physically abused. When he came back to the UK, he was a changed child, withdrawn, self-harming, and unpredictably violent toward other children. At just 12 years old, Hassan received a youth conditional caution after he brought a knife to school, produced it during a lesson, and said he wanted to kill himself. In June 2019, he threatened to stab another student with scissors. On another occasion, he assaulted 2 female pupils. His pattern was clear and consistent: aggressive behavior, poor impulse control, and a disturbing fixation on using weapons when he felt disrespected or mocked. Hassan was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder in July 2019, scoring just barely at the threshold for diagnosis. He also met criteria for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and displayed traits of conduct disorder during childhood, including aggression that psychologists warned could persist into adulthood as antisocial personality disorder. Despite these diagnoses, experts would later conclude that Hassan had full control over his actions. His short temper and aggressive tendencies were personality issues he could manage, not symptoms of an uncontrollable condition. Hassan had spent most of his life under the supervision of Croydon Council's care system, bouncing between foster homes and periods living with his mother, who admitted he was beyond her control. By September 2023, he was living at home again, trying to move forward. But the afternoon before Elianne's murder, something happened that set everything in motion. On the afternoon of September 26th, Hassan was with his friend Kay in the Whitgift Centre when a group of girls, including Elianne and S, confronted him. They challenged and criticized him for how he treated S at the end of their relationship. The encounter wasn't violent, but it was humiliating. The girls threw water at him and teased him about his physical appearance and his special educational needs history. Hassan handled the situation calmly in the moment, but afterwards, he told his friend Kay something chilling. He couldn't let that experience slide. Runs. Kay knew Hassan well enough to recognize the danger in those words. He immediately warned Hassan not to do anything dumb, not to ruin his chances in life. Hassan ignored the advice. That night, he made his decision. The next morning, September 27th, he woke up with a plan. Hassan prepared carefully. He went to the kitchen and took a large knife from the drawer. He put on a face mask and black gloves, with another pair of gloves hidden underneath. Everything about his preparation showed deliberate intent. He wasn't reacting impulsively to a sudden confrontation. He was methodically getting ready to hurt someone. At 8:31 a.m., CCTV cameras outside the Whitgift Centre captured what happened next. Hassan arrived at the meeting spot with his friend Kay, who served as a mutual friend to everyone involved. S walked up to Hassan, carrying the bag of his belongings. She asked for her teddy bear. Hassan took the bag from her hands, but gave her nothing in return. Instead, he just walked off. S followed him, confused and frustrated. She walked alongside Hassan, asking repeatedly for her belongings. Hassan refused. At one point, he said something strange. "I don't want to hurt her." The girls exchanged puzzled glances. They were diligent pupils who didn't want to be late to school. They didn't have time for Hassan's games. As the group reached the Whitgift Centre entrance, at exactly 8:31 a.m., Elianne made a decision. She decided they didn't have time for Hassan's prevarication. In a moment of playful defiance, she ran past him and grabbed the bag S had given him. She was laughing as she did it. Laughing. It was supposed to be funny, a light-hearted way to speed things along and get her friend's belongings back. Elianne had no idea she'd just signed her own death warrant. Hassan ran after her. It was a short distance, just a few seconds of chase. He caught her by a set of bus stops. CCTV footage captured every horrifying second of what happened next. In full view of people milling about, commuters heading to work, shoppers starting their day, other students on their way to school, Hassan took out his knife and stabbed Elianne. She dropped to the ground immediately. The CCTV shows her scrabbling around, trying to back away, trying to fight him off. Hassan continued to strike at her. 4 knife wounds, 1 on her left shoulder, 1 on her right leg, and 2 on the right side of her neck. The final blow severed her carotid artery. Dozens of people witnessed the attack. Bus passengers on the stopped buses, pedestrians on the sidewalk, schoolchildren in uniform. All of them watched in horror as a 17-year-old boy in a face mask and gloves repeatedly stabbed a 15-year-old girl in her school uniform. Multiple people immediately called 999. The emergency response was rapid and massive. Samuel Sinclair, a London bus driver who was a passenger on one of the stopped buses, ran to Elianne's side. He provided immediate first aid, trying desperately to stop the bleeding, while emergency services raced to the scene. 3 London ambulance service crews arrived within minutes. The helicopter emergency medical service was dispatched. Paramedics worked frantically to save her life. A gleases to a broader, but the injury to Elianne's neck had caused catastrophic bleeding. Even with immediate expert medical intervention, the wound would have been fatal. At 9:21 a.m., exactly 50 minutes after she'd laughed and grabbed that bag, Elianne Andam died close to where she'd been assaulted. In the meantime, Hassan ran. CCTV cameras tracked his entire escape route. He ran off with the knife still in his hand, then hid it behind a garden wall as he fled. He threw away the face mask and gloves. During his attempt to escape, he changed his upper clothing, trying to alter his appearance. He caught 1:30 bus, then changed to the 64 bus, heading toward his home address in New Addington. Detectives from the Met's murder squad immediately began the painstaking work of trawling through CCTV footage. Over 45 hours of video from multiple cameras across Croydon were reviewed and analyzed. Investigators mapped Hassan's movements in the lead-up to the murder and after, when he fled the scene. Every step was documented, every camera angle examined. The digital footprint was undeniable. As Hassan's bus approached Goldcrest Way in New Addington at 9:45 a.m., less than 90 minutes after the murder, a local police officer spotted him getting off. The officer asked his name. Hassan lied, John. But the officer was suspicious. He noticed what looked like bloodstains on Hassan's clothing. He immediately arrested the murder suspect. Body cam footage captured the moment Hassan learned Elianne had died. "It's murder," the officer told him. Hassan's reaction was cold, detached, no tears. no remorse, just the realization that his plan had worked exactly as intended. At the police station, Hassan gave a false location for the knife, trying one last time to obstruct the investigation. But investigators followed his route on CCTV and eventually found the weapon behind the garden wall where he'd hidden it. Forensic analysis quickly linked Hassan to the murder weapon. His DNA, his fingerprints, his digital trail, everything pointed to premeditated murder. Hassan admitted to manslaughter but denied murder. His defense team claimed diminished responsibility because of his autism. They argued that Hassan's autism spectrum disorder had substantially impaired his ability to exercise self-control when he killed Elianne. They painted a picture of a traumatized young man with developmental disorders who couldn't control his rage. The prosecution presented a very different story. They called 32 witnesses over a 3-week trial at the Old Bailey. Psychologists and psychiatrists testified about Hassan's diagnoses and his history of violence. The jury heard about the knife he'd brought to school at age 12, the scissors he'd threatened another student with, the female pupils he'd assaulted, the pattern of aggression that had followed him for years. Expert witnesses explained that while Hassan did have social communication difficulties that made it harder for him to respond normally to complex social situations, the driver of this offense was not his autism. It was his short temper and his aggressive tendencies, personality issues, over which he had control. Professor Blackwood testified that Hassan's personality issues were things he could manage, not uncontrollable symptoms of a disorder. And then of this followers first. The prosecution pointed to Hassan's behavior after the murder as proof of his self-control. He wasn't in an emotionally disturbed state when he was arrested. He'd phoned his friend Kay. He'd communicated with another girl he had planned to see later that day. He'd carefully disposed of evidence. He'd changed his clothing. He'd lied to police. All of these actions showed deliberate, controlled decision-making. A consultant child psychiatrist who examined Hassan after his arrest concluded that there was no evidence of any kind of acute mental disorder at the time of the murder. The connection between Hassan's mental health conditions and this offense was insufficient. By the jury's verdict, ASD had not substantially impaired his ability to exercise self-control when he killed Elianne. The jury saw the CCTV footage of the attack. They watched Elianne laugh and run. They watched Hassan chase her down. They watched him stab her repeatedly while she tried to fight back. They heard testimony from the friends who witnessed their classmate being murdered. They listened to S describe how she now suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder after watching her best friend killed in front of her. After deliberating for 11 hours and 42 minutes, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of murder by a majority of 10-2, unanimously guilty of possession of a bladed article. There were shouts of "yes" and "murderer" from the public gallery. Elianne's family collapsed in relief and grief. Justice had finally arrived. But Hassan's violence didn't end with his conviction. While remanded at Oak Hill Secure Training Center in Milton Keynes, he got into a confrontation with a fellow inmate who accused him of killing girls. Hassan's response was chilling. "I'll do it again. I'll do it to your mom. Do you want to end up like her, 6 feet under?" He later punched another child in the face during his time in custody, knocking the victim to the floor. At his sentencing hearing on the 13th of March 2025, Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb addressed Hassan directly before a packed courtroom. She outlined the impact of his crime on Elianne's family and the broader community. She spoke about the mural painted on Wellesley Road near the bus stop where Elianne died, a mural showing a lovely teenager full of life and purpose with a radiant smile. Its presence marks the determination of the community to declare to young men like you, as forcefully as they can, "Put the knives down," the judge said. Dorcas and Michael Andam, Elianne's parents, had their victim impact statements read to the court. Their words were devastating. "Our home was full of her music, her laughter, and her energy," Dorcas said. "But now, the music has stopped. The laughter is gone. All that remains is a deafening silence, a hollow, painful silence that echoes through every part of my life." Dorcas addressed Hassan directly. "You savagely took her life in the most degrading manner in broad daylight. You killed her without mercy as she pleaded for her life. You walked away without any sign of remorse, as if her existence meant nothing. Not only did you take Elianne's life, but you also destroyed mine emotionally and mentally. Your actions were senseless, monstrous, and evil." Michael Andam's statement captured a father's unimaginable pain. No parent should ever have to bury their child, let alone in such a violent manner. I could not protect her. That guilt will weigh on my heart for the rest of my life. Hassan's defense lawyer, Pavlos Panei KC, stood before the court and acknowledged the horror of what his client had done. A crime as horrific as this leaves no real room for advocacy, he said. There are no words that can possibly minimize, justify, or excuse anything Hassan Sentamu did. The lawyer tried to explain Hassan's violent streak, his anger, his outbursts. He spoke about Hassan's traumatic childhood, his time in the care system, his experiences of abuse and neglect. He mentioned suicide notes found from around the time of the murder, suggesting Hassan had enough good in himself to recognize and hate himself for it. But no amount of explanation could change what Hassan had done. Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb sentenced Hassan Sentamu to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years. For someone under 18 at the time of the offense, this is called detention during His Majesty's pleasure. The starting point for a 17-year-old convicted of murder is 14 years. But Hassan had carried a knife to the scene with the specific purpose of using it as a weapon. Parliament has determined that in these circumstances, a 9-year increase is required to mark society's abhorrence of knife crime and to act as a deterrent. The judge considered aggravating factors. Elianne was a 5-year-old girl, unarmed, wearing her school uniform and on her way to school among morning commuters. Several other children witnessed the unprovoked attack on their friend. Hassan disposed of incriminating evidence quickly afterwards. These factors justify the severity of the sentence. The judge also considered mitigation. Hassan had no previous criminal convictions. He had come to the attention of social services as a young child and had been the subject of child protection plans because he suffered neglect and other disturbing childhood experiences that caused trauma and interfered with his. His emotional immaturity was somewhat greater than that of a typical person his age, but none of these factors were enough to reduce the minimum term. After carefully weighing and balancing all the significant features of the case, Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb returned to 23 years as the just minimum term. Hassan will spend every day of that minimum term in custody before he can apply for release to the parole board. If he's ever released, he'll be subject to supervision, license conditions restricting his freedom, and a lifelong liability to be recalled to prison. "Stand up, Hassan Sentamu," the judge said. "You have taken the life of a precious child. You have devastated the lives of those who knew and loved Elianne Andam, a bright, kind, and loyal 5-year-old girl on her way to school with her friends. The responsibility for Elianne's death will be with you for the rest of your days." Outside the courthouse, Dorcas and Michael Andam spoke to reporters. Their voices trembled with emotion and relief. "She was fought for, and this is the result," Dorcas said. "So I'm happy. I'm happy that in the end, this is justice." She turned her attention to Hassan directly, though he couldn't hear her words. "You thought you were smart. You tried to be slick. The people saw you for what you are, and I hope you never get out." Detective Chief Inspector Becky Woodsford, who led the investigation, spoke about Elianne's final moments. In the moments before her death, Elianne was laughing and smiling, completely oblivious to Sentamu's rage and the events that were about to unfold. She was simply standing up for her friend, doing what she thought was right. And this, it seems, was Elianne through and through. Someone who felt very strongly about right and wrong, and was always there to support her friends. The mural on Wellesley Road remains today, a permanent reminder of Elianne Andam's radiant smile and unfulfilled potential. It shows a beautiful teenager, full of life and purpose, frozen forever at 15. Beneath the image, the community's message is clear: put the knives down. Hassan Sentamu, now 18 years old, sits in custody awaiting placement in adult prison. He continues to maintain that his autism should have been a defense, that his conditions should have reduced his culpability. But the evidence speaks for itself. The CCTV footage, the 2 pairs of gloves, the face mask, the kitchen knife taken from home, the deliberate chase, the repeated stabs, the cold disposal of evidence, the lies to police, the complete absence of remorse. On this day, the 27th of September, 2023, Elianne Andam dreamed of becoming a human rights lawyer. She wanted to change the world, to fight for justice, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. On this day, Hassan Sentamu had already decided she would never get that chance. The SS, they were going to the moment. The cameras recorded the moment she laughed and ran at 8:31 a.m. They recorded Hassan chasing after her. They recorded the attack that horrified dozens of witnesses. They recorded Hassan's escape route as he fled the scene. They recorded everything except the one thing that mattered most. They couldn't record Elianne's future, the cases she would have argued, the lives she would have changed, the injustices she would have fought. But Elianne Andam meant everything to her parents, her younger brother, her friends, her teachers, her community. They fought for her. They testified for her. They refused to let Hassan's lies stand unchallenged. And in the end, they won the fight that mattered most. Hassan Sentamu will spend the rest of his life paying for what he did to Elianne Andam. 50 minutes. That's all the time between Elianne's laughter and her last breath. 50 minutes between a playful grab of a shopping bag and catastrophic bleeding on a Croydon sidewalk. 50 minutes between an ordinary school day and a family destroyed forever. Samuel Sinclair, the bus driver who provided first aid, stayed with Elianne until she lost consciousness. 3 ambulance crews worked frantically. A helicopter landed nearby. But some wounds can't be healed, even with immediate intervention. A severed carotid artery, 15-year-old's life, bleeding out onto the pavement while morning commuters watched. This is Elianne's story. This is her justice. This is what remains when a girl stands up for her friend and a boy decides that disrespect deserves death. This is what happens when the care system fails to identify the warning signs until it's too late. This is the price paid when a knife becomes the answer to humiliation. Somewhere in Croydon, a mural keeps watch over the Whitgift Centre. A girl with a radiant smile, frozen at 15, will never realize the potential of her life. Gone but never forgotten, always loved, always missed, always 15. This is her legacy. This is her memorial. This is Elianne Andam.